Okay, welcome. And thanks for your interest in the Metro Tree Bank funds. All of you are friends. Most of you are either on the Metro Tree Advisory Committee or a Beautification Environment Commissioner. And we really appreciate all of your efforts to make our city green and clean. So this is going to be more in just a chat format, but I do have a section at the end for questions because I think many questions you may have will be answered throughout the 16 slides I have to share with you. So again, welcome. Today we're going to talk about how to use the tree funds, and we're going to talk about previous and current projects, how to develop a planting plan and application, the approval process, and then questions. And as you can see, we have a lot of funds in this account and it continues to grow. So these funds come from developers, and when they're not able to meet their standards for our tree ordinance, they have the option to pay into this tree bank. And there are currently many of you that are members of the Tree Advisory or Beautification that have projects that they've completed or working on currently. So this is the very important thing that you need to realize is that the average cost that you can spend is $362.50 per tree. And that can include some of the following things: the trees, the planting, the mulch, watering and maintenance, tree guards, which could be either for the ones at the base for weed eaters and or the ones for the deer guards, depending on your location. And budgets can be combined with other funding sources and grants and matching funds, like the state has the TAPE grants, Tennessee Ag Enhancement Grants. Perhaps you are associated with a neighborhood association as well, and they may have funds to help with this. Because again, $362.50, it's really to help the tree over time. So sometimes the budget needs some addition to it. So do consider partnering with other organizations in Nashville. We have the Nashville Tree Conservation Corps and the Tree Foundation and Root Nashville, and the Wild Ones, and so many other groups that potentially could be your partners in getting these valuable assets into the ground. Another way to solve or help reserve some of your funding is by planting with volunteers. So if you take out in your budget the planting costs by a professional, that can really help make sure you have enough funds perhaps for the watering. And then watering devices such as tree diapers need to be pre-approved at the time of planting.
Well, I just was listening on the same thing. I just kept hearing echoes. What is that?
So I'm hearing a little feedback from someone right now, just to let you know. So this is really important. Tree planting's on public property, not private property. Just to note that the recent funding that was passed by council, that is for private property, and that will be rolling out within this year. But just note that this tree bank funds is for private property. So that could be local, state, or federal properties, including parks and greenways, the housing authority properties, rights of ways, which are street trees. And in that case, often there's an opt-in and opt-out process to, even though it's the public right of way, the underlying property owner should be involved in whether they have a tree or not. In public schools, that's from Head Start to lower school, middle school, high schools, and community colleges and universities. Stormwater buyout properties, and we're currently working with TDOT on a model test to see how that would work out as well. So there's a lot of places here that it's about 6% of our land in Davidson County are public. So
Jennifer,
yes.
looks like unless this is you using this 615-862-6488, I think someone is not muted and that's what's causing the feedback.
Okay, thank you. So tree planting location, and I appreciate that, Patty. Tree planting locations are the key. And I have some examples. We have more projects than this, but I've just put in a few examples to show you different types of projects. And this one is a project work that a beautification commissioner has worked on. And we asked to see where the location is, and then a planting plan. It's easy to see here, but this is very basic. So we don't have to have a professional map done. You can even draw it and sketch it out. So I don't want that to be a problem for you in presenting your idea. Here's another one. This was in Donaldson area. This was where a sidewalk was put in, and the beautification commissioner brought this project up, and we did a planting, and the Donaldson Gateway organization has a watering truck, and they're watering this. So again, look at different partnerships that come in and help keep your costs down because of the 362.50 limit. Another example, this is another project out in the Donaldson near the Percy Priest Dam. It's a beautification commissioner, and there's a very long, extensive median. Medians are great. The wonderful thing about this is there's no overhead or underground utilities. So that made this project very easy. And this is in a park. This is another example. This is going to be an arboretum eventually. And just to note that the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council certifies arboretum statewide, and I put their web address there. And it's a program, many of you know, I was their director for a very long time, and we put this program together, and it's been very successful across the state. And this is another one, just to note, I've cut and pasted 4 pictures that were submitted, and this was Croft Middle School. And they did a lot of planting there. And there was a volunteer organization, I think it was a Google service day or something like that. And lots of volunteers came out and got this planted. So again, they didn't have the cost of planting, which can be quite significant. That helped their budget out. So in planning your site, there's things you need to be aware of as your underground and overhead utilities. And the 811 service will mark utilities below ground. It's a free service. And so it takes, just realize it takes 72 hours for them to mark the area. And then you go back and look at it, and then you say, oh, I can't plant trees here or right here because the gas line's there or a water line is there. And then there's some more information. And I have all these different components written in a document that if anybody is interested, of course, then I can send that out to you to help you understand these little things that are very important in planning a site. Now, the public right-of-way, in general, the public right-of-way, and this is a general rule of thumb, is from the back side of the sidewalk to the street. But let's say there's not a sidewalk, then oftentimes there's that rectangle flat metal water main box in the yard. It's from the back of that to the street. So it's the furnishing zone for all the utilities. There may be telephone poles there, street signs, and those kind of things. So that is a public area where trees can be planted. Now, as we talked about earlier, a lot of groups are planting in the right of way, but it's important to, again, ask the residents the underlying property owner for their permission. And some have sent letters, others have done signs, but you're giving them the option to opt in or opt out. Sight lines, it's really important. We don't want to plant a tree where someone comes to an intersection and now they can't see cars coming because we've planted a big tree right there. And so in the bigger intersections, we should be at least 25 feet back. In some of the smaller situations, it can be 10 feet back, like for a driveway. But that has to be also approved by the Nashville Department of Transportation, and one of their engineers looks at that. Now, anytime anybody works in the right-of-way, it's very important that they get a permit to work in the right-of-way. And they are required for a project, whether it's volunteer planting or professionally planted. But we were able to get it so that they are not charged a fee. However, you still have to get the permit. And those fees in a core of Nashville are $100, and outside of Nashville, $55. So that would really knock into your budget of $365.50. So there's a link, and you note there that if it's going to be planted by a volunteer or contractor, but either way, the permit is required. Now, also, we have been working on a street tree inventory throughout our city. And one of the things they also noted were where are locations where trees could be planted in the right of way. And so if you're interested in a certain area, we can work with you to show those particular maps in the areas where you're interested. And you can get an idea of areas where trees could be planted. Now, in the right of way, there's 3 groups that work on approval. I work as the one on tree selection, the species, and I look, one thing we don't allow fruiting trees. We don't want that mess on the sidewalk where people can slip or, track deer that can hit cars, that kind of thing. And then obviously we would never plant an oak under utility trees, although that's been done in the city. Sightline by a transportation engineer and NES representative if there's a utility. So I usually facilitate that process. So it's not that big of a deal for you. Now, the application requires certain information, some of the basic stuff like what you work through a department. So if it's like a street tree, you work through me, that kind of thing. So you put down what department's applying for this. If it's a park, it's Parks Department. The department contact and phone, the agency or agencies. So if you, your neighborhood is planting in the right of way, that would be you. You would be the agency and the XYZ Neighborhood Association. Their contact information, again, the location, the contact, the planting dates. And then we try to do all the planting in the planting season, which is October through March. And who will be planting? Is it the neighborhood association is going to be out there digging holes or whatever, whoever that is, we will want to know that. Or it's a contractor will actually be doing the planting. Now this is where it can get a little interesting, maybe that's the right word, but this is where there's so many different factors that come to play. There's no one way to do this, but just note that whoever does this, if it's a contractor, they have to be a Metro contractor because these funds go through Metro Finance. So anything over $2,500 to $24,999, there will be 3 quotes. Under $2,499 is 1 quote. And that's, these are again, Metro policies. Metro vendor list is provided, so we can provide a list for the effort to get the quotes. Now, one thing we also provide for that is the tree planting scope of work. So we have certain specifications of how we want our trees. So that's, certain nursery standards, and then how we want them planted, certain standards for that. So we have that document as well. These are some budget examples. The top one, we want at least 2-inch minimum, unless it's a smaller tree, but so you see the caliber, the height minimum, the numbers, the cost, the total and subtotal, and that can be filled in by the people providing the quote. And then let's see, so that's just one example. And then the planting installation of 13 trees, and other, like if a permit's required, that's put into the budget as well. And then this is another example below where these people just put in the estimated cost of trees. They were having volunteers plant, so they had money left over in their budget to hire the Cumberland River Compact's water program for 2 years, because we want all of our trees to be watered for 2 years, and then to have an initial prune. Now, an initial prune is what we call it corrects issues of the tree, and you usually do that after the 2 to 3 years. You don't do that right as you plant it, because the tree needs all of its branches to produce as many leaves as possible during the growing season, because that's what also then feeds the tree and creates more nutrients to develop roots. So that's, when you get a tree and get it well pruned, in that first prune in year 2 or 3, that tree is really good to grow and to be a strong, won't have co-dominant leaders and won't have crotches that will potentially split as it gets older. So these are important parts of the puzzle in doing this tree planting. Okay. Maintenance plan. This is again part of the application. So how, watering, how's that going to be done? Sometimes it's the neighborhood association will get out and water the tree. The initial prune, again, working with one neighborhood association that they're going to be trained how to do the pruning. And then the long-term maintenance. That's something, depending on its location, we can look to see within Metro how that can be implemented. In the right-of-way, if a tree dies, then the Department of Transportation is always taking down dead trees. And then replacement. So all these things will be discussed. Depending on which department you're working with, they can help you with those details. Now, once the project's been submitted, then the Metro Working Group are representatives from these different departments: codes, general services, parks, planning, transportation, and water. Each of those have people that work directly or indirectly with trees. And so it's a approval process, a vote, if you will, from those different departments. And they look, they'll ask some tough questions, but they will look, and sometimes the questions we're able to answer, or we go back and work with the applicant on making some adjustments to their application. They're all rooting, no pun intended, but rooting for applications to be approved so we can get more trees in the ground. And then there's some acknowledgements. If your organization, neighborhood group, or whomever sponsors the project and they get out a press release or put something in their newsletter, just to note that we have some verbiage here. This is not a grant. And so that's really important to note, not to use a grant. And here's some example wording below. You can read it there. And we always promote Root Nashville tree planting campaign, because the more we get that out, the more successful we all are. And then this is so very, very important. So Root Nashville has a tree plotter on their website, and you go there and you plot your trees, and there's different categories. Like there's one that's awesome individual. If you have plant a tree in your yard, if you plant a tree under the tree foundation or tree core, they have list. And then the tree bank has a category too. So you go under that heading and plot your trees there, and they will count towards our citywide goal to plant 500,000 trees by 2050. Okay, so that's a general review of how you can access the funds in the Metro Tree Bank. And I hope if you have questions, I'm here to answer. If I don't know every answer, then I'm going to make notes and get back to you. But are there any questions?
Jennifer,
Yes,
Jennifer,
I hear you.
can you hear me?
I can, all the way from
Do you
Mexico.
want to speak briefly about? Do you want to talk just briefly about the bid process? Because do you provide a standard bid form for people to use, or is that?
Right.
I mean, you do most of the bidding, right?
Well, what we're trying to do, that's a good question. I'm going to rephrase that in a way. The bid process, what we're trying to do, these funds are for the public to use. And we are supposed to get more staff, but we haven't. And we need for the community to take ownership of their project. And so we can help you with your quote and give you a form for it, but we need you to take the list of vendors, Metro vendors, and send out the request. And then also, it's fairly simple, straightforward. But the other thing you need to know is to say, I need these by X date. That's really important in some requesting bids, is you give everyone a deadline.
Okay, so just to be clear, you're no longer doing the bidding. The applicant will oversee the bid process.
That is our goal, because we realize we've got so much. This is a good problem to have. I was just thinking a few years ago when I had no money. So this is a good issue, but we need our constituents out in the community to help with this process so we can get more trees in the ground than I or the few staff members we have are able to do.
Gotcha.
But that's a good question. I'm glad you pointed that out, Carol. Other types of questions?
Hey, Jennifer, it's John. There's a question that came up in the chat.
Okay.
Looks like Noni sent, but she's asking, how long does the approval process take, start to finish?
We push those through really quickly. So if there's, usually we ask for, a day or two turnaround from our staff members to review it, no more than a week. If there's a question, sometimes I'm able to answer it, or I go back to the person that submitted it and we work on those details, but it's quick. Again, we're highly motivated to move these forward.
Good.
Right. So is that on average a week, 2 weeks?
I would say on average a week.
On average,
As soon as
okay.
it's ready, as soon as the application is ready, it goes out that day to the working group.
Okay.
And we ask
then,
for a day or two to respond.
right. And then do the bids need to come in as a part of the application, or is that once the thing is approved?
That's a really good question. I've always done it once it's approved. We don't have that many vendors in Metro that plant trees or do this type of work. And so it's usually after it's approved, we send it to them
Jennifer?
because they take time to do that. And we want to make sure that there's a project that's really there for them to do.
Jennifer, can I speak to that?
Mhm.
The plans and budget should be approved before it bids. You understand?
And sometimes that's tricky, but you can do Carol, you did a proposed cost. So you could work on your budget of what you thought things could cost. And that's how you came under your budget.
Right.
Anybody else
But
have a
I mean,
question?
everything should be approved by you before it goes out for a bid.
Right.
Jennifer, I have a question. This is Patty Gertner.
Hey,
So
Patty.
if people ask me where this money is coming from, in kind of like a simple overview, can you explain what developers are expected to do that they are not doing, that then they have this choice to put money in this fund?
So there's a tree ordinance for development, and it's we can send that out. There's a lot of details to that, but in general, that second slide, I think, is an elevator speech that comes from developers who are not able to meet their tree planting requirements, and that's per the tree code. And I will say that we've asked our people, our tree urban foresters and codes, are you really, we want trees in the ground, and they really work with them to try to get them in the ground. And this is not their first option to pay into this fund. So it's for development that cannot meet their tree code requirements, and they're given this option to pay in lieu of that.
Thanks, Jennifer. That's very helpful to make the point that this is not like the first option, just to pay money into a fund, that they're really trying to get these developers to do what they're supposed to do. And if you could send out that link to that code section that explains what they're required to do, that would be really helpful.
Okay.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer, you mentioned,
Jennifer?
John, go ahead. And then
well, 2-inch caliper trees. Will you consider 1-inch caliper trees?
well, I mean, if it's a smaller type of tree like a red bud, Carol planted some standard good looking trees, but they weren't going to be 2-inch caliber. But if it's a bigger, medium sized to a large tree, we want at least, a 2-inch caliber. Oh, there was another question.
Jennifer, this is Angie Henderson. I was just going to say, particular to Patty's question and the option to contribute to Tree Bank. Patty, we anticipated, and I think it would be interesting to do some follow-up, but that would be triggered when you really have site constraints, right? So we elevated the tree density units required pretty significantly. And, some of the concern about it was, say in Wedgwood, Houston, you're revamping an old building that's kind of zero lot line, and it's already built to the street. And, so basically you've got some kind of physical constraint that does not allow you to meet what we call TDU. That was the legislative intent there, but I think, Jennifer, it's going to be important to track, because as in all things, the implementation on the back end from staff, we want to make sure that this is kind of a last resort based on very specific physical constraint of the site, that people would be opting into the tree bank. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. That's our council representative, Angie Henderson. Any other question or thoughts?
Jennifer, this is Richard Hitt. I got a question. In order to submit an application, you need a list of trees specific to species, right?
Correct.
Does the application, if you don't get a bid for that up front, how do you make the application?
Carol, do you want to discuss how you did yours?
So the safest way is just base it on the $362 and change. And, you know, work your project around that. Now, some trees are going to be less, some could be more, but that's, I mean, that's all you're allowed anyway. So that's what I would, that's the simplest way to do it.
You know, the trees vary in price. You could look up and talk to some people in advance. I've usually put like $125 down as a rough estimate, and you have to make certain assumptions there. And a lot of the planters that we've been working with have been changing their prices, so that hasn't been as easy as it used to be to note how much to put per tree to plant. It could be, Jim, are you still on here?
Here.
A good estimate for, you know, could be what, $75, $100 to plant that tree?
Yeah, roughly. I mean, it should be around that. That's what the Shelby Avenue tree planting came in.
Mm-hmm. And so, you know, right there, you're at 225-ish. And that's why perhaps if you really want to save some funds, let me finish. If you want to save some of your funds to hire the Cumberland River Compact, you know, right now they're charging is it $65, $70 per year for growing season. And so we want you to at least have watered for 2 years. So that has to be factored in. Now, if your neighborhood association's going to be watering those plants, you know, don't have to put that into the budget. Carol?
Well, you kind of covered it. All the add-ons, the labor and materials add up quickly. So you can't just base it on the cost of the tree.
Right.
So
And
the simplest way is just work with that limit number.
I just took the average. So we had like 20 different species of trees and they all vary in different prices. But then when you put them in a spreadsheet and then just look at all their prices and then just do the average of the cost, that was sort of the guiding, that was the guiding principle for how we got the per tree cost of the project. And, you know, so that means, of course, you know, some trees like a yellow wood is going to cost more than a sugar maple or a pin oak or whatever, or tulip poplar, because they're slower to grow and harder to find. So of course that or shagbark hickory was a good example. That was like, we had a few of those and those were like $270 a pop. But when you took the average of the 120 trees that we planted, I'm just making this up, it came in at around like 130 or something. So, and that's what we use for the application, and that's what we put down.
The rule of thumb is $100 a caliper inch for a regular tree.
well, some of them are not that much because we do, you know, 2-inch caliber at 125 or 150. But remember too, that you have the opportunity to use funds to match. Like if you get a Tennessee Ag Enhancement Tape Grant from the Division of Forestry, you know, that's cash match, and these can be matched. That will help you in your budget too. But watering is really important. And if you don't have a method to water, you've got to save some of your budget for that. Now, we'll say the Cumberland River Compact, you have to ask them in advance if they will accept that planting to water. And so that's part of it. And I ask anybody on here, we're always looking for people who water businesses and things. I was fortunate in the Donaldson that the Gateway project there had a watering truck and they agreed to water plants. But you gotta kind of get out and figure out, you will and deal to get the project done sometimes.
Jennifer, it's
Yes.
it's
Hey,
Lisa.
Lisa.
Hi, in Midtown. Thanks for hosting this. And to the rest of the group, I'm a beautification commissioner here in District 19 and also the acting president of our HOA. Jennifer's been very helpful in walking and touring around the neighborhood to identify some beautification and tree planting. But one of my questions that today is regarding the organization of support. Believe it or not, here in Midtown, we do not have a neighborhood association. And many of the residents are in rental communities, not ownership HOAs. So we are without an organized effort and support to be able to do a project of this scope. Do you have any advice on other ways that we could organize an effort to get some more trees in Nashville? We're more and more trees. I mean, in Midtown, more and more trees are being torn down, and there is nothing, around that's coming up to replace those.
So, not having a neighborhood association, there are several tree nonprofits that potentially would partner with you.
Okay.
There's also Root Nashville, which comes out of the Cumberland River Compact. In street trees, that would be something I could talk with you one-on-one about options there. The division of the water department is doing some street tree planting downtown. So maybe some of that is already planned for through that. Another money that we get through the stormwater fees for planting trees. So like Lisa noted, so many of you over the years, I've gone in and walked your streets or driven around your neighborhoods with you. I know Lisa and I did that during the COVID. So we followed each other around downtown. She's downtown.
Yeah, we did.
And so, whatever it takes, I'm here to help and look at, I've been doing this a while, so I look at things perhaps differently than other people and see opportunities where you may not. Or conversely, I may say, you might say, this is a great idea, and I'll think of 5 reasons why it's not. Sorry, but it's just the experience here.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Any other question? Well, thank you. And I appreciate.
Lisa, I wanted to.
Yes, Jim.
I wanted to add a little more color to Lisa's question. Lisa, we've found a lot of success when you monitor developments as they're happening in your neighborhood. So like especially when there's something like an SP, when there's like a zoning variance request happening, attending that meeting and insisting that they have
Jim, we've lost you. Jim,
I'll answer it.
You're back. Okay, well, we've lost Jim, but I think he works.
Hey, Jennifer,
Yes.
there were a couple more questions that came through the chat that I
Okay.
don't think maybe you saw.
No.
One of them was about preference for native trees as opposed to non-natives. So if you could address that, that'd be great.
Good question. And I realize we have a lot of, I realize who's on the calls. It would be great if you could choose native species. It's not required. Sometimes the site is very specific and you need a certain type of tree. That's fine too. All trees have to be on the Metro Tree Advisory Committee tree list, which is very extensive. So that is up to you, but that would be great if you could choose native species. I will say that our city is in that effort now to become a BEE city USA, and planting more natives will be great for that effort.
This is Richard again. I've got a question.
Great.
If an application is submitted and approved, is it approved for the dollar amount that was requested or just whatever it costs to plant the trees that were enumerated?
It's the dollar amount requested.
So if you saved money by installing the trees with volunteers, would you be allowed to buy extra trees?
It's per tree, but you would be able to say, well, gosh, now I can hire someone to water the trees because I've got funding left over for that, for
Okay.
example. Now,
Thank you.
If, for instance, that school we saw, that Croft School planting, that's out near the zoo and in the woods. There are a lot of deer there, so they had to fund deer guards, and that's a cost that you need to be aware of. And then also most trees at least get the weed eater protection at the base, so those have to be factored into your cost.
Okay, thanks.
And we do like the trees to be watered in at planting, even if it's a volunteer effort. In some neighborhoods, I've seen them, they have bucket brigades from the neighbor's spigot to the tree in the right of way in front of their house. That works if you get it coordinated. And I'm telling you a lot of things, and I don't mean to overwhelm you. This is a big issue and a big commitment, and we Metro really appreciate your interest in this. And you get one of these under your belt, and the next one will be easier. And these funds are continuing to come in, so this stream is not going away. This funding stream. But you have a few veterans here, Carol Ashworth, Jim Gregory, just to name a few that have done these projects. And we all learned a lot along the way. So it can happen, and your learning curve will be great, and our city will be better for your efforts. So that would be greatly appreciated. Okay. Yes.
This is Cynthia Hernandez.
Hi, Cynthia.
Hey, just wondering if there's like an approved list of trees. I thought I had seen something like that on the Metro website.
Yeah, that's the Metro Tree Advisory list of trees. And it's trees we recommend. There's a few trees that we don't recommend. Obviously ash, Bradford pear. I hope the silver maple's on it. Those kind of things, but it's fairly extensive.
And that can be found on the website.
Tree, yes.
What's that website?
Nashville.gov or trees.nashville.gov.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And Cynthia, I want to note this to you all, because we have members of the Tree Advisory Committee, like Cynthia's with the Tennessee Environmental Council, and the Beautification Commission. And the way the city organizes or structures those two groups is the Tree Advisory Committee works under the Beautification Commission. And all of you have the opportunity to come out at the Lawn and Garden Show and work a shift giving out tree seedlings. I'm going to be resending out that link this afternoon or tomorrow for volunteer sign up. And remember, it's 4 nights and 4 days, so everyone's help is needed and appreciated. Okay, anyone else? This was fun, and I really do appreciate your being here.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you all. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Jennifer, will you send out the guidance on this to the email list that you've got for this meeting?
Send out the application.
Didn't you say you had a guidance document on this?
That's for planting in the
process?
right of way. Mhm.
Oh, that's for planning. Okay. Yeah, if you could send out the application, that would be great. And then could you turn the PowerPoint into a PDF and send it out? Might just be helpful.
Okay.
Jennifer, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was a good idea, having a PDF, because sorry, I was a little bit late on it. And the other thing I was thinking was you mentioned a limit. So could you make that clear in the email, like what the limit was in the proposal for number of trees, or the cost? You know how you talked about savings. You could apply it to the watering.
Right.
Watering.
And that would be in the one of the earlier slides. Let me just go over here real quick. Oops. Well, it's $362.50 per tree that could be spent per tree.
But is there a limit in the number of trees? Like,
No.
especially because I talked to Dietra the other day, and her student that was still
Matthew,
working on this.
Yeah. Why don't we? That's a great subject, and why don't we work on that in one-on-one?
Yeah, that'd be good.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank
Plus,
you all.
time's a little short. Okay. Talk to you later.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for putting this together.
Sure. Happy to do it.
Yes, that's it.